You are listening to the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Caleb James. With me, as always, Spencer, the Detroit Dirt Digger Church. I was going to say ditch digger, but that seemed a little too harsh.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're digging in the dirt, though, either. That's a bad one.
Yeah.
It wasn't my best. Today, we have a special guest. Another guest. We've been having guests all week.
Yeah.
All month. Not week.
Yeah, we're closing in on a month of guests. Almost.
I know. That's a first. We normally don't have guests on just because we don't want to do the extra work, but this has been if this is a precursor to how our summer will go, we'll have lots of fun stuff out here. So he is the author of 2 poetry collections, I believe, as The Moonlight Shines and American Bug, as well as the author of the novels Diesel Doctrine and the Temporarily Embarrassed Millionaires, and your newest work, which is The Massacre at the Comic Shop, Mr. Nick Ulanowski. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Ooh, there we go. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. It's good to be on the show.
You originally started, from my brief research here, you were writing horror poetry. Is that what those collections are, or that's just poetry in general?
I was writing poetry in general. I wrote another novel in my early 20s that was never really finished, called The Stone Angel. And it's bad. I never plan on putting it out in the world. But
as most folks' novels are.
Yeah.
Yes. I incorporated poetry into that book. I was like, hey, how about the protagonist just writes a bunch of poems? And a lot of those poems I liked. And I even ended up liking more than the rest of the book. One of them is even in my first book of poetry, As the Moonlight Shines. Really more I got started writing poetry because my best friend at the time, who I grew up with, was murdered. He was stabbed to death.
Ooh.
And I had a lot of thoughts and feelings, and I was honestly imagining his death over and over again in my head. And I had wrote some violent imagery, and I wrote how I was feeling, and that was kind of what As the Moonlight Shines was. And there's some very horror poetry in there too, because I was also watching a lot of horror movies at the time. I was writing about them, but it tied into everything else I was writing about as well. And my newest book is currently on Kickstarter. It's finished. It's been professionally edited. I have a cover and back cover. It's called Massacre at the Comic Shop. And honestly, I revisited a lot of my old feelings when I wrote that book, because it is about the protagonist is the owner of a comic book store, and his friends and regular customers getting killed off by a toxic fan in a mask with the chainsaw.
I saw in your Kickstarter he was dressed in a Scream uniform because the movie was coming out, or was that just a separate thing you had him?
Oh, it was very much my own idea. I wasn't even going to mention that anywhere, but then the movie came out at the same time that the Kickstarter dropped, and I was like, I'm gonna
ride the back of that wave a little bit. Why not? Might as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, when I was thinking about what I wanted for the cover, I talked to Kevin P. West. He's a great artist who I've worked with before, both privately as a commission, and he illustrated my poem, MAGA Hat and American Bug. His bread and butter is really really drawing horror movie monsters and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to draw, I want him to draw any actual inference of, the Ghostface imagery. I don't want Paramount to sue me.
Yeah.
So, but Ghostface is mentioned in the book. The killer is dressed up like Ghostface,
which you can have in a prose novel.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah. That's another reason why it can't be a comic. They're talking about that on the Palo City Comics podcast and asked about that. Yeah, I don't want Paramount to sue me.
It's always a good idea not to get sued.
Yes.
Even if you hit all your Kickstarter goals, that's not going to cover. That's not going to put a dent in that bill. So.
that'd be a hell of a stretch goal.
Yeah.
Right.
If we cover Paramount suing me. Yeah, that probably wouldn't go over too well, I'd imagine. But still cool. I'm imagining, because it's set in a comic book shop, you have a galore of pop culture references and things like that. That I would imagine the killer being dressed as Ghostface would fit right in with that.
Yes, and I do have on the back cover of the book, what the killer says is, "This ain't cosplay. I just wanted to kill you like they do in the movies."
Nice.
And the killer is at first mistaken for a cosplayer walking into a comic book shop, but then it turns out that they actually are a killer.
Sorry, I was trying to look up your one book, and it came up something about Amish daydreams. I was like, what is this? I was like, oh, that's somebody else. No.
you know what? I can just keep talking if you got it.
I just wanted to circle back to As the Moonlight Shines,
Okay.
because you were talking about, kind of rough poetry at times. You're just finding your footing in that world and really just dumping your feelings, I'd imagine. So with this new project, have you taken anything from that, even if it's just like I noticed, like you were talking about the feelings that went into that, so I imagine there's a lot of loss and grief and all that stuff. Did you bring that to this new book, or is this more of just like fun, like more of a entertainment?
I would say it's both of those things and something else. So something else is I am trying to, it is a horror novel with something to say. I'm trying to say something about comic book fandom, trying to say something about comic book fandom, media consumption, etc. I don't want to say too much, just because you got to read the book. It's definitely a statement about the idea for the book came to me when I was just thinking how similar anonymous trolls online are to masked slasher villains, and how they, you don't know their identity. You can swear on this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
The more the
you don't
better.
Know their you don't know their identity. They fuck shit up. They create terror. Essentially, in the context of fandom spaces and comic shops, that's exactly what anonymous trolls do. It's like when I don't own a comic book store. However, one of my best friends is the owner of a comic book shop. We hang out on his off days. Anytime someone kind of walks into the door of a comic shop, you're thinking, is that the same person that, engaged in a target harassment campaign of a female comic book writer or editor, and
yeah, you wouldn't know. It's like Giga Chad 69 online. Right. Like it could be, somebody you think could be somebody completely different online.
Yeah. Oh, and you just touched on when the gears turned even more in my brain when I was thinking, how, there's also, actually, I got to give a quick shout out to Phil Falcos. He wrote a horror comic called Haunting. I was talking to him at the Chicago Comic Book Convention C2E2 last year about this. He said, sometimes, you almost like don't even know, even if it's someone and then I was like, oh, that's a good murder mystery, maybe it's maybe it's a stranger, maybe it's someone they don't know, and that's something that's kind of stressed in the book, that really the killer can be anyone. There is a final reveal of who the killer is, but it kind of doesn't matter,
Yeah.
Because that's what anonymous trolls and mass killers do.
Yeah, because by the time you find out, the damage is already done.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Well, with the toxic fandom and the online trolls, I do love that you use the horror villain as the place card for these people, because like a lot of them do have the intellect of Leatherface. A lot of them are creepy perverts like Freddy Krueger. Like it could just be whatever you need them to be, because they are this blank slate, and it's just like this representation of evil online, but then in person they could act like the nicest person to you. You wouldn't know. South Park did an episode on that. What was he? Skank Hunter.
Yeah.
Kyle's dad, Skank Hunter or something.
That was like a couple episode one.
Yeah, and he was like, this nice, respected lawyer, but then online he's like telling people to kill themselves, and he's just the biggest piece of shit ever.
Photoshopping dicks in people's mouths.
Yeah, ruining lives.
Yeah.
There's a weird compulsion there that people have to do that online. I don't know if it's just because you could be anonymous, or if it's really their inner feel. I suspect a lot of it's just people wanting to lash out because they feel bad, and they can't do that in the real world. So if they want to go and harass the actresses from the new Lord of the Rings show, or, the new Little Mermaid actress, like anything like that, because even if you don't like the product, why do that? Like, what does that really bring? Like, how does that enrich your life? To go, oh, I don't like this live action Little Mermaid casting, or the song decisions, or the diversity, or whatever they're going to do. So you just like go online, this crusade to shit on it and are you trying to change other people's opinions? I don't know. Like you said with the horror villains, maybe they just want to murder, they just want to ruin everything around them for no other reason than just to do it. But regardless, it sounds like a fun book. Like, is it all take place in the comic shop, or is it, structured outwards?
Almost. So my other novel, Diesel Doctrine and the Temporarily Embarrassed Millionaire, it's sort of just Diesel Doctrine. That book, the entire book took place at the truck stop. I did work at 2 different truck stops for 3 years. It's based on people I used to know and their thoughts and feelings and struggles and stuff like that. This book almost entirely takes place at the comic book store. The whole thing does not. I can't even really tell you where else it takes place. So that's like a spoiler. But almost the entire book does, in fact, take place at the comic book store. The next chapter is kind of like the following Wednesday a lot of times. Because Wednesday is the day new comic books come out. Yeah, and speaking of that, like when I was writing it, I did want to make that clear. If you don't know that Wednesday is New Comic Book Day, I originally had that written in the first chapter, but not my official editor, but someone else who looked at the book and helped me with it. Like she said, that sentence kind of messes with the flow, and I just slightly changed it to like the most popular day for new comic book fans to come to the store. And then the next chapter, I explain that to the reader. That was something that I struggled with a little bit with the balance for like I had to think about the audience is comic book fans, but also someone who might not be familiar with that world at all. It's kind of stepping into a world they don't know about. That is part of the appeal of the book, I'm hoping, is like to someone who doesn't even really know about comic book stores to read the book and kind of feel like they do now. But of course, it is also a horror story as well. I don't want to.
But you are like towing a fine line because one, you're doing the crossover between having regular book fans and comic book fans, but now you're bringing in horror fans too. So you technically have three different genres, different mediums.
It's a big jumbo of pulp culture.
Yeah, so like you said, you have, not everyone knows New Comic Day is Wednesday, but you could bring that in, and then the people who don't know that can enjoy that, but then you could bring in the elements, because I would imagine, like you have Ghostface, for instance, these things usually go hand in hand, but if you have somebody that only reads fantasy novels or something, if they don't watch horror movies, they might not necessarily know that.
Or at least know it, but like
the
Ghostface,
description.
Like they would, like if they see a Scream commercial, they know it, but they don't know like that's Ghostface. Like as
well,
as
I mean,
being
a lot of
referenced.
people who aren't into horror don't actually know that he's called Ghostface.
Yeah.
They would, they just think Scream maybe if they think anything.
His name's Scream.
Yeah. But when you go with all those things together, like it's just a fun mix, and I'd imagine, not having read the book, but I would imagine you get to have a lot of fun just with like the pop culture, because it's a comic shop. So what do people? Yeah, what do they talk about? Everything and everything. Think of Clerks or something along those lines. Like you have a lot of fun dialogue, and then this backdrop of murder and mayhem.
Yeah,
I mean that's something I would want to read. Like that just sounds awesome.
Yes.
Don't feel free not to answer if if it gives anything away. But I would feel like I would want to kind of mess with some of the deaths and have them like either like imitate or like reference like famous like deaths within like comics. Did that ever cross your mind, or would that be giving too much away for the story?
Not exactly. I didn't exactly do that, but there's something like that I would be definitely giving something away in the story.
Okay.
Want to see him break someone's back
Yeah,
like Bane did Batman or something? Yeah. Get beat to a bloody pulp like Superman from Doomsday.
People getting thrown off of bridges.
It might be a little excessive, but that could be a fun follow-up if you ever do a sequel. Just everything is a pun, and everything has comic-related deaths.
How many people can we shove in the fridge?
Going back to my favorite horror movie death, I think is and when Jason goes to space, when he freezes that chick's head and smashes her on. I don't know how you do that in a comic shop, but that'd be awesome. He stuck her head in the ice cream freezer.
My favorite from that is when he literally beat the one chick to death with the other
chick in a
chick.
sleeping bag. That movie was awful, but the deaths were amazing. We digress a little too far. So you have, which I think is your day job now, but you have a background in journalism.
I did.
How does that affect, how has that shaped your writing style? Because if you're going into a prose novel, a fiction novel, that's obviously different from journalism. So do you still keep that same voice, or do you have a different author's voice for the way you write fiction and poetry?
I think I, in many ways, very much kept the same voice. Writing for a local newspaper and writing about, observing people, writing about the things they say, that affects, especially especially the parts of the book that are more about kind of the shop and the characters' thoughts and opinions. Like the way I wrote that is very similar to the way I write do news writing. Mm-hmm. However, it's still different. It's I still approach it differently because I think it's draw a vivid picture in the reader's head in a way that I do sometimes in news writing, but not always,
Well, I bring it up just because I think of, like Hemingway got his start in news, and obviously literary fiction's a lot different from genre fiction and the kind of stories you're telling, but just that short, punchy style that you have for journalism, because you only have a certain word count. You have to keep things minimum. You have to keep the information going. You can't really focus on the details of certain things. Whereas in a prose novel, you want to focus on the details sometimes. You want metaphors that you can't use in journalism. You want to paint imagery, but you can't be too descriptive. So do you have any, conflict with that? Or do you find that when you're writing fiction, you can just let it go and just kind of just write what comes to you and just enjoy the process versus having to be more strict like you would writing for the news?
I think it's a mixture between the two things, because I also don't want to write too lengthily. A lot of my chapters are relatively the same length, which I think that's probably pretty common. But that is something that I think I was able to do because I exercised my writing muscles writing the news. But also I think it's just really more so that, I'm constantly exercising my writing muscles for work. So when I sit down to write a novel and something that I care about, it's not like I haven't been doing that. It's not so much that I think that you lose it if you don't write for a while, but
definitely
maybe
becomes
you're not
more
upset.
difficult.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing, where writing the news just allows me to exercise my writing muscles. However, I absolutely think that the way I've written news articles crosses over a little bit to the way I write a novel, or at least the way I wrote Massacre at the Comic Shop. Especially in the way people are quoted and stuff. Quoting is a big part of what I do. And I think that the way I have like punchy quotes in the news, a lot of times in the book, there is kind of like punchy quotes where it's not necessarily the point of the chapter or the point of the book or even the point of the character, but it's still a punchy thing this person said about pop culture or comic books or something. And the way that is written is probably similar to the way I listen to the recording of a interview with someone, I pick out a couple things that stand out of what they said. I feel like I kind of already said this, but I guess to maybe to reiterate, when I'm writing about the different characters and what they're saying about pop culture, comic books, or horror movies, etc., that is when my journalism background comes in the most.
But as far as the setting and just the storytelling, you can actually have more fun with that.
Absolutely.
See, I wondered if you've ever thought or had an idea for either a novel or just like a short story or something set within like the news ward, like that you could like especially with you seeming to do a lot of horror things. I think like I feel like there would be something there. I didn't know if you've ever thought or had any plans for anything like that, because that's another thing us writers tend to do is take our real life aspect and kind of use that, especially as we're starting, trying to make a name for ourselves, to use that as things to write about.
Oh, that's a really good idea, actually. Maybe that could be a sequel even. Yeah, I'm writing about what I know. I'm very familiar with the comic book world. Honestly, even though I am older, I only got my journalism degree a few years ago, so I've only been in this business for so much time, But I mean, that's a good idea.
Well, you touched on something that always would worry me about, because we have friends who are writers who also work office jobs and they write for a living or things like not fun writing, like technical writing, copywriting, things like that. So do you ever get any kind of burnout? It's like, I worked all day, had to write a news piece and do all this stuff today. Now I got to go write my novel. Do you ever have any kind of conflict there?
Not really, actually. I think that, in fact, sometimes I can't wait to be done with my article so I can get back to the story I'm writing.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah. Because the analogy I always hear when it comes to that is like, that's like a guy who works in a hardware store all day and then goes home and looks at nails.
Yeah, it's like, you might not want to do that.
Well, the other thing, you guys are called the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast. I think that, and it's legal now in Illinois, so I don't have to worry too much about this. But I sometimes after I'd get done writing an article, which I write completely sober, I hit the THC vape and I start writing creatively.
Do the job sober and the fun stuff with a little bit of an extra.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Take the edge off there, so to speak.
Get that muse flowing a little bit.
Since we're in this area, I personally, for me, if I drink, I could have like a drink, maybe 2 drinks, and my writing's fine. Whether it's serious writing or if it's just like my fiction or something. And by serious writing, I mean like when I was doing editing and different, things like that for people. But when you well, for me anyway, like if I have too many drinks, like 3, 4, like I'm useless. I can't write. So do you ever have that, or is it just like, I just have one hit and then I'm good and then I can write? Or something like artists, I find like with THC stuff, it seems to be more of a creative kind of drug for them versus alcohol or things that bring you down. Or,
I think it helps relax and stimulate like the creativity.
Yeah.
It helps you think, to where I think like alcohol a lot
kind of
dulls you down. Like,
Well, I think THC kind of in a way makes your thoughts louder, and and I have more of an urge to write them down. The other thing is, I think that weed makes me more confident as a writer. Where it's every thought that comes into my brain,
brilliant.
Yeah,
it's
brilliant.
I remember,
and that actually works well with creative writing, because then you can write a whole bunch of shit and then just cut out the garbage and later on you're sober.
I remember Kevin Smith talking about that before, like whenever he started smoking, that it helped him with being like, I don't give a shit, I'm just gonna fucking do this thing, and then put it out. Like that's how we got like yoga hosers.
Oh god. Punching mini Nazis. That was a weird movie. Well, that aside, just because I am interested in like your journalism background and your writing style, because I think that would be fun to just, because you wrote it, obviously you're not gonna be able to break it down really, but like if we had, one of us read your work or something, could we kind of pinpoint like, oh yeah, this guy's a journalist, or kind of break down your style a little bit? It's just, as a writing nerd, that's kind of fun for me. I like doing that. Just tell how people, like their background, how they came to writing, and because everybody has a different way, like a different origin story for how they became a writer. And you were talking about like the poetry and stuff. I was just wondering, like, what kind of influences did you have? Were you reading anyone specific, or do you have any writers that influenced your style at all, or anything like that?
Well, I grew up reading the Goosebumps and Fear Street books, and Everworld and Animorphs, and I think that's kind of when I fell in love with fiction in a lot of ways. And one of the characters in my book is actually named after David from Everworld, which was the YA, the YA book series written by K.A. Applegate, who wrote Animorphs. And the way R.L. Stine writes twists and cliffhangers, that influenced the way I write it.
I'd imagine the pacing too, because you said you had like very like standard chapter lengths and things like that. R.L. Stine did that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, and the pacing, absolutely. Although there's some very dialogue heavy parts of my book, which is not in the Fear Street books. But that's probably, again, that's more my journalism background, the dialogue heavy stuff. And I read a lot of nonfiction. Honestly, I've read and reread over and over a book called Lockdown America: Police and Prisons in an Age of Crisis. It seems like something that wouldn't influence creative writing, but it does. That book tells so many stories of things that happened. I looked at the way Christian Parenti wrote that book closely, and I emulated that a while ago. As far as more recently, it's kind of hard to say. I've just kind of been doing it for a while, and I write the way I write.
I think once you find your own voice and you're comfortable with your writing, and you're not really trying to emulate the Stephen Kings or Neil Gaimans of the world. Once you're just comfortable in your own skin, so to speak.
That's half the battle.
Yeah, then you could just focus on the work, and you're not really worried about how you come across, or are people gonna really appreciate what your art is, or you just want to create. I think as writers, we all go through the phase of we want to impress people, or we want to be liked, or we want people to think of us in a certain view us in a certain light. But once you get beyond that and you can just focus on the work, that's when you actually create things that people enjoy, I find. At least I find.
Absolutely.
Going back to your Kickstarter, and I could be wrong because I only glanced at it earlier, but I think you already hit your goal.
I did. My initial funding goal. However,
you can do the stretch goals and stuff. But
I'm hoping to hit the stretch goals. I want an ebook available. It's doesn't make a lot of financial sense to buy another ISBN, pay for additional distribution with Ingram Spark, and then also pay for the conversion, because graphic designers, at least ones I know, don't even know how to make EPUB files. It's kind of a very specialized thing. It's very expensive for something that I'm only making like $1 for each time. And unless I break those stretch goals, there's probably not going to be an ebook. And so I am hoping to crack the stretch goals. And there's rewards for people who back the book, and I do hit those funding goals. every $200 is another stretch goal. I'll have a new poster made with the back cover art with the rusty bloody chainsaw and the Massacre at the Comic Shop logo. Kristen Palmer, who's a tattoo artist, drew kind of a sexy female vampire in my book of poetry, As the Moonlight Shines, to illustrate my poem Garlic Soup for the Soul. And I'll have more little prints of that, just 5x7s.
I like that title, by the way.
Yeah,
Garlic Soup for the Soul.
Yeah, that's good. I was thinking that's good.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes I run through, like, you know, when I'm talking about things, I'll briefly like reference something. And I'll just shoot right past it and like, wait, maybe I should have stopped to elaborate on that.
I feel that that's the newsman coming out with like the headlines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's what you need to stop and put a little pause after when you say something like that. It's like, hey, focus on that because that's cool.
Yeah. And then, wait, what? Oh my God, what was the other stretch goal? Because there's 3 of them. Oh, the other one is new bookmarks, which I already have bookmarks made promotional for the Kickstarter, but they'll just be slightly redesigned to say, you know, available on Etsy, Amazon, and Barnes & Noble. Because I do have an Etsy store where I sell my books, and sometimes prints associated with the books.
What printers do you use?
I use U-printing mainly. That's so
you just put it all together yourself, and because I know.
Oh no, I do. For a while, my designer was Jorge Santiago Jr., who's a comic book artist who drew a great comic called Spencer Unlock, which is about a dark reimagining of Calvin and Hobbes. And I loved the way he did both the flashback, where it looked like newspaper comic strips, and a darker, edgier modern time.
I read the first volume of that. That was pretty good.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The artist on that book, he did all my covers, was just my designer. He's an art professor now. He's working on his own comic book called Final Gamble, and he just wasn't available this time around. So I had to get a new cover artist and a new graphic designer.
So you're actually doing it the right way, though. You're hiring people to do these things for you, because a lot of people in the indie community, they do everything themselves, but then they also fail a lot of times because, you know, they're their own editor, and you can't just edit your own work. You can't just put together your own cover. Not everybody's skilled enough to do that, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I kind of designed the inside of As the Moonlight Shines myself, but then I ended up still needing help from Jorge Santiago Jr., who did the cover, and I'm glad he was like patient with me back then. I just learned, okay, just have someone else do the graphic design work. You know, this isn't like it's not that I have no ability, but it's not my forte. You know, it's not my skill is writing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Free you up to do some other stuff.
Yeah, you don't have to get bogged down and all. I mean, I think you were mentioned off air about like marketing and stuff, and just doing all that stuff. Everything that's not writing for me sucks, and I don't know how people spend so much time. Again, if you spend that much time doing, you're probably not creating the new thing, because you're focused on that. But we don't need to get bogged down in that because we did that last episode. We were bitching about that stuff, but I know a lot of indie authors. I think Dan Noakes, who was on the podcast, he got because he for a while he published everything through Amazon, and he had a lot of work, and then he ended up getting booted from Amazon for no reason. They didn't give him a reason. Banned for life, all of his work banned, and he had to scramble to get somebody to print his work and stuff. Big pain in the ass. But I know a lot of people that have these horror stories with Amazon, Lulu, like these different. Because we were looking, I think, at Lulu for a while when we were going to do the anthology. That's what I heard. I heard it was like, well, even just like, because I looked up some YouTube videos of people's books they got in the mail, and it was just like fucked up. Like it just didn't come out the way they wanted. I don't know.
They don't ship books properly. I have noted that's another thing about them. You're right.
Yeah, like the boxes came in and they were just all like jammed up, and it just was awful. Mm-hmm. And they also, you could only buy off of them, I think. Like, so if you sell through Lulu,
really sucks about them.
Yeah, so if you're on Lulu, you can't sell through Amazon as well or something. Like it only sells through Lulu. That's stupid.
And you don't even get like a discount yourself as an author too. You can set the price like way higher, but you're basically kind of just paying full price for your own book. It is ridiculous.
See, when I looked into it initially, like this is when we first, like 2016 or something, when we first started. It seemed better, but I don't think there was many people going to it, like using I think once it became more popular, because when we started, that was around the same time like the indie community, writing community really took off, and people were just like, oh, we could publish our own work now, and then everybody started doing that. and we could go into this a little bit because like I said, you already hit your first goal for your Kickstarter. I'm always very impressed by that, even if it's not a lot of money, which to me that seems like a lot of money, but because some people have $30,000 Kickstarter goals, but it's like I'm always impressed by that because it's just the marketing and being able to get people to buy your work ahead of time before the work even comes out. I think that's just a very difficult thing to do. And when the market is so oversaturated, everybody's doing Kickstarters. How do you get people interested?
When you have like, there's an author you probably Charles Soule. He has a Kickstarter out for his new book and like a companion book, and it's like you're a legitimate author plus like comic book writer,
and you're still on Kickstarter.
Yeah, like how are we supposed to compete with you, man?
Yeah.
So you found any of that challenge? I don't know if this is your first Kickstarter, or if you're a pro by now.
This is my fourth Kickstarter.
Kickstarter.
My fourth Kickstarter. Fourth book and fourth Kickstarter. There was an earlier edition of As the Moonlight Shines that was on Lulu Press. I don't like to talk about it. But if you look back to my first Kickstarter, I do repeatedly refer to it as a second edition. It's because I published on Lulu the first time. It sucked. I designed it myself. I think I wanted to update it a little bit, add a foreword, add some cool cover art, and do a Kickstarter, do it correctly. I think the other thing about Lulu back in the day is there weren't as many options. We're talking like late 2000s, early 2010s. Now there's so many ways to self-publish. I personally use Ingram Spark. They work very well for me as a poet and a prose novelist. I don't know if they're the best with comics. As far as Kickstarter promotion, that was the question. I think this is my fourth Kickstarter. I go to cons, talk to people. Honestly, it's a lot of other indie creators backing my Kickstarter because they know the struggle, so they just back me. And then my friends and family, and then other people who just find the book on social media or on Kickstarter, or maybe I handed a little promotional bookmark to them at a convention.
I was gonna say, I'd imagine the convention circuit's probably the best way to get people to actually back your Kickstarter because they get to meet you, maybe pick up one of your other books, and
that's what I was gonna say. At least it helps that you have some other work there too, that you can kind of hopefully with each new project build that base.
Well, social media is so informal anyway. So like Twitter, for instance, I probably get 3 or 4 times a week sometimes people sending me Kickstarter. I don't even know who they are, just private messaging me their Kickstarter and stuff. And it's like, even if I knew you, I can't back all these Kickstarters, let alone probably even look at them, because that's just like so much different stuff coming at me. It's like I don't even look at those anymore for the most part because there's too much. But I would imagine if you're just screaming into the void of Twitter, for instance, like if you have less than 50,000 followers or something, you're probably not getting too many backers from there. So I would think like the personal route, conventions, like you said, other indie authors and stuff that you're friends with, that's probably the way to go because that's the only real way you can make a connection with people is in person, I feel. I mean, we met some cool people online and stuff. We've made a lot of friends that way, but until you actually talk to them, even like this, just, screen to screen, at least I could see you. But but when you're just talking to somebody through fucking text, it's just like, that's not really like you were talking about the villains and the online trolls. It's not a real person at that point. It's just a digital imprint.
Well, that's what I like about, especially like when we have guests on, or even whenever there's a podcast that I'm listening to, there will be times where like there's an author that I don't know about, or maybe if I even do know, and it's like, and then I hear him on a couple podcasts and like, oh, I like this guy. I'm going to check out his stuff. But if I never heard those, I probably wouldn't. Well, or it would take me longer to get to them.
That's a good point as well. A lot of the new books I buy, because I'm one of those people, it's hard for me to give a new author, and by new author, I don't mean somebody that just came out. I'm talking about somebody I just don't know or never read their work. It's hard for me to give new authors a chance just for the fact that there's so many books I haven't read already on my shelf. Usually when I listen to different podcasts, that's the main way I end up finding new authors that I'm like, oh, I like their personality. I like what they're talking about. I find it interesting how they have this specific passion for this specific writing style. So I check out things like that, usually based off of podcasts, YouTube videos, different things like that. So I think that's where people, if you do want to promote online, that's the way to go, is a podcast. And, if you want to make YouTube videos, probably TikToks. We're old, so I don't know about you, but I don't follow those. My wife sends me TikToks all the time. I'm like, I don't fucking care.
I'll just wait and watch it on the reels.
We wait till they're a year old on Instagram Reels. Like the old men we are. Yeah, Instagram's another one. Like I do not find writers on Instagram ever, because I don't know how you promote on Instagram in a way that's engaging, unless they're promoting a podcast. Sometimes I find them that way, but.
I actually find Instagram to be a great tool. As of lately, there are people moving off of Twitter and stuff, and I do have artwork associated with my book, so it's easy to use that imagery to promote in Instagram stories and in posts and stuff.
Do you do anything like excerpts or anything on there? Because that'd be cool, like to go along with because like you do have the leg up because you actually hire graphic designers and stuff. You have cool book covers. That's what people want to see. But if you have, you can have excerpt, even if it's just in the paragraph below the picture or something, like that's probably a cool idea.
I do. I did have a post when I was promoting American Bug. I did that more. Whereas with Massacre at the Comic Shop, I kind of want a certain amount of mystery of what's inside the book until you actually read it. But aside from that one quote, this ain't cosplay. Yeah. I just feel like they do in the movies. That is a quote from the book I'm using. No, yeah. When I was promoting American Bug, I had Instagram posts with little excerpts of the poems. I used Medium to like reveal. Since I wrote American Bug as its own cohesive unit, it is a collection of poetry that with a narrative through line, and so most of it was not shown to anyone until the book came out, except for my editor. And yeah, I did. I used little I used little quotes, but I haven't done that really with Massacre at the Comic Shop. Maybe that is a good idea. Maybe I should
get some of your bloodier bits maybe and cut it off just at the right point, get the reader to want to read more.
Yeah. But then I don't want to necessarily reveal who lives and who dies, though. That's kind of
that's why you cut it off before the actual murder, or cut it off mid-murder so you don't know who's being murdered.
Yeah.
There's ways around it. You're a journalist. You do this for a living.
Yes, I know.
You can make things in context or out of context at your will.
Absolutely. That is a good idea. It seems obvious, but I haven't. Maybe I should make a little post with that.
Well, I know that's how like the Instagram poets got, like you see them in Barnes and Noble and stuff now, because that's how they got famous, was posting those little poems as their picture, and just took off like that. It's a little harder for prose writers, but since you write poetry as well, you could at least have do some of that probably.
Yeah, and I did do that with American Bug when I was promoting that.
As far as I know you said you had an Etsy shop. Where do you sell your books anywhere besides that? Or, I mean, I know you go to conventions as well, but because we talked about this, I don't know why we never bring this up. If you're not traditionally published, can you at least get in local bookstores, or I don't know how exactly that works.
You can. If you use Ingram Spark, Ingram Spark is owned by Ingram, which is the same distributor that the largest book companies use. So Ingram Spark sends it out to Bakers and Taylor and Ingram, which are Bakers and Taylor is what the libraries use, and all the indie bookstores, they use Ingram. So does Barnes and Noble, and they have it in their system. So you can just with little bookstores, I send emails and also physically go there, and I talk to the owner, and they look it up in their computer, and they see that my book is right there, and they can order it. And I have done that a few times before. Yeah, the local bookshop in my area used to have my books. They've kind of downsized, and unfortunately, they don't have them anymore. But I was even at some Barnes and Nobles, although I do worry about then it being returned, and then having to pay the money for it. So
yeah, that's a problem with especially Barnes and Nobles. I would probably stick towards that's a tough one though, because it's probably very surreal when you see yourself on a Barnes and Noble, like I made it.
Oh yeah,
but then
that's the Instagram post right there.
Yeah.
But I did that. I have Instagram posts, my books on the shelf at Barnes and Noble. Most of those were eventually mailed back to me, and I had to pay for them.
That sucks. You ride the high, and then you're oh, well, at least they were there. Well, I think it was, I forget what episode it was recently. We talked about how, when's the last time you went into a Barnes and Noble and just picked out a book that from an author you didn't know, just based on the cover or the premise? Usually you don't. 99% of the time somebody goes into the bookstore, if they don't have a specific idea of what they're getting, they have a vague idea. Well, I like Neil Gaiman, so I'm going to go to there. I want to read some Alan Moore, whatever it is. So
Nobody wants to read Adam Moore, Caleb.
shut up, Spencer. So if you go into the Barnes and Noble expecting to see your book selling out, that's probably not going to happen just because, you know, you're not one of the top books that people are looking for. But just the fact that you even get in there is that's bragging.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd brag about that. I'd be like, yeah, fuck you guys. I'm in here. I don't care if I got to pay when it comes back. I'm in here right now. I'd probably just like buy it myself.
Right, yeah. Buy like 5 copies.
Damn, this book's selling out. We have to keep ordering it.
Yeah, there is a Dark Lotus song where Violent J from ICP says, "We used to buy our own records at the store, so they would think it was a hot seller in all the malls." I thought about that. Like, I should have just went to Barnes and Noble and bought those copies off the shelf.
Fake it till you make it.
I mean, hey, if they're gonna get returned and you have to pay for them anyways, might as well pay for them through the bookstore.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
There's worse things you can spend your money on than your own book. It's just as long as nobody sees you doing it.
Yeah.
That'd be a little pathetic.
Oh god, could you imagine the cashier, like if you had like the author photo or something that had 3 on the back and they were checking you out and they just saw and they were just like, oh, what are you doing?
The only thing that'd be more pathetic is if you bought the book and then you sat down at the coffee shop in the Barnes and Noble and started reading your own books and people would see you reading it. That would be terrible. Like, what a fucking pompous douchebag that guy is. I know who you are.
But like reading it like with like the book out in the open, like just
hey dickhead, did you not realize your picture's on the back of the book? They know it's you. Oh, if my first book comes out, I'm doing it. I don't care. I'll just sit there and read. I'll have a beret on too. Just sit there. Yeah. We went grossly off topic, I think.
Well, I got a question for you, and like I know with the logistics and the money and stuff behind it, but if you could take all that away, and with you being a fan of the genre, have you put any thought or like ever wanted to like write a comic instead of like go away from the prose and try to get something done like like an indie comic or anything like that? Or
that's absolutely on my mind. I have to have an idea and a script first, which the gears are turning in my mind right now. I mean, maybe the sequel or prequel to Massacre at the Comic Shop could be a comic instead of a prose novel, because I am thinking about a sequel or a prequel to this book.
That'd be a fun challenge, just working with an artist, and because that's a completely different style of writing.
Yeah.
It's not narration heavy, so you would have to find a way to write your story so the artist could tell the story through the art. Like that'd be fun. I'd like that challenge. Go on. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, it's great. Yeah, I would have to think about the right artist and find the perfect artist. I know. So.
Well, I just didn't know if that'd even be something that you'd be interested in, or if it was just like, no, I would rather just like stick with the prose and just read my comics other than trying to like make comics. Like, I know some people rather not, do one or the other, or some people want to do both, or everything.
Oh, that absolutely is something I'm interested in. It might be what my next project is, but right now I'm still promoting this Kickstarter, and so and even I'm still doing some slight rewrites as well, just adding paragraphs here and there. Basically, I have to be very careful about that because it has already been edited.
Yeah,
I don't want to. Yeah,
you don't want to pay for another go around.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just thinking like that. It doesn't even have to be a sequel. If you did a comic book, you just do a comic book version of the novel. Maybe a year or two down the road, because then you could tell the same story. But like I said, it would be in a different way.
Yeah, you have the visuals.
That's a good idea.
You couldn't use Ghostface, obviously. You'd have to
change it up a little bit,
work around that. Yeah. But yeah, that would be an interesting idea too. Because I was just thinking like different writers we know. Like we know a bunch of people with Source Point Press who. They wrote like novels and stuff, and now they mainly focus on comics, or they turn their prose novels into comics, because that's like an indie press kind of like they're bigger, but they still focus like on a lot of. You probably know them because
I'm very familiar. I mean, they're at all the Midwestern conventions.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, we've met a whole bunch of those guys over the years, because we used to do press gigs at all the Wizard Worlds and stuff. So we our fake journalism, we got to do a bunch of write-ups for that just so we can get in for free. That was our main goal. We just wanted to get in for free. But then we're like, God damn it, we went to 80 panels this weekend. I don't want to do this anymore. Should have just paid the $50.
And none of them were that good.
No, they're never that good. Because we made it a point, we'd be like, you know what? We're not going to focus on interviewing the celebrities. The stuff people probably would want to read about. No, we're going to focus on the indie guys. We're going to go to the panels for the romance novel. It just never worked out. It was terrible every time. It was like 1 or 2 panels every year were good. But anyway, so we are pulling on an hour here. Going back to your poetry, I asked you offline if you wanted to read one. And I saw you shuffling some papers here earlier. You got one?
I do. I was thinking. I was thinking about which one. Still thinking about which one.
It's not the garlic soup one, is it?
I can read that one since we talked about it. So why not?
And which collection is this one in?
This was in As the Moonlight Shines.
Oh, that book's a lot bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah.
It is. This is the new one. Yeah. Again, I kind of designed it. The inside myself, and that was kind of a mistake. I shouldn't have done the workbook size.
Yeah, that one's that's pretty big. The other one's a little more normal sized.
Yeah. As American Bug is and this is even slightly bigger than the original one. This is a hardcover. I can't think of the actual size right offhand, but actually, I'm going to read a poem that's not in any of my books.
That works.
Give us some newness.
Ooh.
Yes.
DPW exclusive.
There you go.
It's called No One Dies in Their 30s. No one dies in their 30s. In their teens and 20s, folks kill themselves. They get killed by others and they die in accidents. But in your 30s, we're more responsible. We have full frontal lobes. We're less chemically imbalanced. So no one dies in their 30s. No one dies in their 30s. In their 40s, folks die of heart complications. They die of illness and tumors, not cysts. It may be rare, but 40-somethings die of cancer. It may be considered dying too young, but no one dies in their 30s. Does this mean I don't live every day like it could be my last? Do I pretend like any deadly fear is a thing of the past? No, but I shouldn't succumb to every whimsical temptation. Sometimes it just makes more sense in the upcoming long run. The older I got, the more this attitude begun. Because no one dies in their 30s. This may sound silly if you take it too literally. I'm sure someone somewhere out there died in his 30s. I did a Google search and found that G.G. Allin died at age 36. A shock rocker whose whole bit was doing crazy shit. But I had friends who didn't make it to 25, and if they made it there, they still didn't to 30. But no one dies in their 30s. I understand that in a mass shooting, everyone dies. And when bombs are dropped, they leave no survivors. Your past can catch up to you, and no one is immortal. I'm not being insensitive. Come on, you know what I mean. Almost no one dies in their 30s. I often think about what it'd be like if you were still here, and how much you would have changed with me over the years. You were there beside me on my father's deathbed. We were like brothers to the end, or so we had said. I'm so different now than how I was, or how you were back then. I feel like no one dies in their 30s. The night you were murdered, I wrote the poem Alive with Dark Eyes. I wrote, well, I live to see a time I'm not crying inside. I can't believe I'm alive. I can't believe I survive. But somehow I did, and I'm doing okay. I'm not gonna die in my 30s. I'm well aware that everyone's story is like mine. One of my favorite songs is What's My Age Again? A song about impersonating police and making prank phone calls. It wasn't until my late 20s when I went back to school full time, after failing all my classes to write poems and get high. Rarely doing what I needed to get my shit together, because too many people die in their 20s. The first long-form fiction I wrote glamorized dying young. But after my best friend was murdered, everything changed. I never finished my novel because I was no longer inspired. He was less than a year younger than I was when I was 20 years old. This guided my actions and mindset throughout much of the decade. But I'm such a different person than I was back then. I'm too old to die young, but way too young to die. Because no one dies in their 30s.
You get the poet's snaps.
Yeah.
Do you have plans for that? You gonna publish that in something?
So, yes, actually. So, if maybe the 2000 stretch goal will be a small book called like the Nicky Ulanowski Reader that includes poems from both my books and a few previously unpublished poems. And it'll be just a small little booklet, Kickstarter exclusive.
Well, if I may make a suggestion, maybe you should try submitting that to a couple literary journals first. If it gets picked up, you get to attribute that they get the first, usually I think it's month's first rights or something, but as long as you attribute them in whatever you publish it in, it actually makes it look better because they can say, hey, this was published in said journal.
That's a good idea.
And it just it's also nice to have a credit on your on your resume of that wasn't like from yourself.
Because I mean, like in a deep poem like that with such like emotional connections that a lot of people can relate to, I see those published in a lot of these journals, and I think people would go for that. So that might be something to, just an avenue to go down.
Do you have any you recommend?
Oh, there's a lot. There's Poetry Online. If you pay, it's like $5.14, they'll get back to you within the week. Now, again, some of these are very difficult to get into because they're pay markets. There's 32 poems, and you have to look at the guidelines too to see, because some of them go by the length, but usually they're pretty, like, you could have a longer poem like that and they'll be all right. But so Poetry Online, 32 poems. I think there's one called, I'm trying to think of the ones that will get back to you fairly quickly. There's one that's called One Art, and you know what? There's one that I haven't been able to crack. They're called Anti-Heroin Chic. They post a lot of stuff about like different like addictions and like deeper emotional things like that. So you might have a shot there. They're not a pay market, but again, just, the credit sometimes.
Absolutely.
But yeah, if you just look up poetry submissions online, you'll find a whole list. There's, again, if you want to, the main problem is a lot of these ones that I didn't mention will be like a 6-month wait or specific open periods, but some of them you can get on a little. You get within at least a month, I would imagine. I haven't had much success, but I don't have a lot of poetry that I submit, and again, a lot of the stuff I write also isn't that long or it has that personal impact that yours has. So I think that one has a good shot though. That would be one to shop around. You might get rejected 10 times in a row, but you probably get picked up by somebody, and just like I said, having that credit goes a long way when you put it in your book or whatever. You be like, hey, this poem published in said magazine.
Right.
People like they just take you more serious, They read that and they're just like, oh yeah, that's okay. Even if they never heard of the publication, they just immediately think, oh, if you get something that has review next to the name, you're even better. The New England Review. Well, shit, that's a top journal probably. Like, it'd be all right. And also you can look at local ones too, because Chicago, they have a lot of local poetry journals and stuff you can get, because again, you don't really need a big name one. I'm sure you don't really care about getting paid the $10 or whatever they're gonna pay you for it, but you get, and then also you get the bonus of a good chunk of readers that aren't your base are gonna find you.
Absolutely.
And you could probably do that with a lot of your other poems, but they can't be published. Most places will not publish any work that you had published, even if it was by yourself.
Right. Wait. So and what about that poem is on my Medium account? That's an account that's being published, right?
Can anyone read that?
Yes, anyone can go online and read it.
If you were to submit it anywhere, I'd recommend just taking it down, just for the fact that a lot of places, even if it's your own blog, they say that counts.
Right.
But I've been published where I had work published to like the old DPW site or on my website, and I just took it down when I went to submit it, and then they don't really search. So as long as it doesn't pop up in their Google search or anything, and I've been accepted, and then I just don't publish it back until you get the rights back. Once you get the rights back, like I said, you can republish it yourself. You just have to attribute the journal that it was published in. And again, what are they going to do? Call the cops if you don't? Like, these places, they don't have money. But that's just worth checking out.
Absolutely.
And there are actually there are publications that, even if it's they have a section, even if it's previously published work where you got published in another journal, not even counting just your own stuff, but if you got published in another journal, they'll still accept it as a second printing or third printing. I don't know. There's different rules for it. I never tried that, but that's also something to keep on. There's a whole lot of research probably, but.
And honestly, you would even look on a resume when applying to journalism jobs. Like, say it was published in, because it's writing. So
yeah, usually I find that most journalists, at least the ones I see like on Twitter and stuff that have a huge following, before they even got a job with whatever company they're working for, they have a background, their bio. If you read their bio, it's got published in this magazine, this journal, online here. So usually that kind of stuff actually does help with jobs too, because it shows that people want to read which is ultimately what you want, is employer wants the person that they're going to publish their work or hire them. They want them to be somebody people are going to read. So,
Yeah.
If people see that Nick has been published in this and this, an employer might go, well, that's pretty well to do. This guy's probably got a following. Let's get him in here, and he could be their next Hunter S. Thompson, do a bunch of peyote and drive him up through Nevada, and we'll pay him top dollar. I wish life was still like that.
Have him cover a race.
Yeah, have him cover a race. Well, before we get out of here, if you want to promote your Kickstarter, website, social media, anything you want to shout out, this is your moment.
It's the shilling time.
Well, yeah, it's the time, the greedy, gross portion that people sometimes listen to.
Well, my publishing imprint is called Starving Author Press. If you Google that, you'll find my books. I actually don't think I mentioned that at any point in the interview. My Twitter is at Starving Author, one word. Instagram, cynical_but_fun. At cynical but fun with underscore between. And my Kickstarter is running until April 26th. It's called, as we've discussed, Massacre at the Comic Shop. You can go on Kickstarter, search it, find it easily. Yeah, buy my books, but especially back my Kickstarter.
All right, folks, you heard the man. Buy the GD books. I'll also put that stuff in the show notes, so you don't have to keep rewinding. You can just go in the show notes and click. Lazy fucks. I like to insult the listeners at the end of the episodes just to prove who's actually stuck around, because then they come back the next episode and go, that guy called us lazy fucks. And you are. Except for the German ones that listen, because most of them, they're always biking to work and stuff. Yeah. They're not lazy. But if Americans, I should probably just narrow it down. Well, anyway, Nick, we thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure speaking to you, and I really did like your poem. So, like I said, submit that places. I think it has potential.
Good idea. Thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to check you out on Instagram because I didn't know you had one, so I'm going to look at that when I get off here.
Be a creep.
Yeah, I'm going to be a creep. And, just start liking everything, put little hearts on it. I'll go on an alternate account. Spencer, the Detroit Dirt. Well, you could have been Dutch. I could have made you the Dutch Dirt Digger. That sounds better.
Yeah, that's a little bit better.
Yeah, I don't know why I picked Detroit. Just Detroit's digging ditches, not dirt.
Yeah.
I know it's semantics here. Nobody cares. Anyway, we thank you for coming on, and folks, we thank you for listening. If you want to check out our wonderful work, we don't have wonderful work, do we? Probably not. You could go to DPW Podcast on everything.
Everything.
Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. That's not everything. That's minimal things. Facebook, right? I said Facebook.
Yeah.
Twitter. I said anyway. You can follow me at CalebJamesK.com. I was recently published in Literally Stories, so you can check that out. I have a link on my publication history, and that's a fun story that also deals with murder, just coincidentally. It also has a man with a giant machete. So you folks could check that out, and I would be appreciative if you gave some feedback on that. And we thank you for listening, and we will check you next week. Hopefully not with a guest. No offense, Nick. I'm just tired of interviewing people. 3 weeks in a row is enough.
It's a lot of work.
I want to go back to drinking and being a buffoon and not having to be professional by any means. So check us out next week. We'll do something. I don't fucking know.